Okay, geweldig. So I agree with your suggestion. If you're on the safari, just take 4 elephants and make a sukkah. That's perfect.
Yeah. Surprised nobody mentioned it at the time of the shiur.
You see, we miss your presence. Okay, let's see what we're holding. Rabbi Eliezer said, Arba osar sudois. If the person has to make 14 sudois, and the Gemara is going to explain Rashi says, Chayiv Adam Lechal B'Sukkah. The person has eaten the sukkah achas b'yoyim every time by day, the achas b'layla and every night. So that's 7 times 2 is 14. There are those who ask, one of those 7 has to be Shabbos, which means there would have to be Shalosh Sudos. So why isn't it 15? And we'll see how that comes out in the Gemara. The Chum say, actually, there are those who answer that it means it's starting after the first night. After the first night, where we'll see there's a special chiyuv. It's 14 tudas from there, and it actually includes the shalosh tudas. That's one of the shatam offered. There's no minimum requirement for any type of suda. As Rashi says, in Ratzah Lasanes, if somebody wants to fast all of Sukkot, we're not going to stop him. We're not going to engage him. All our concern is that if you are going to eat, make sure to eat inside the sukkah. The only time where there's a mandate to have a suda is except for the first night of Sukkot, there's a special mitzvah, kiyumis, that you have to eat in the sukkah. There you're not allowed to fast to the Yolef the Gemara. If one didn't eat the first night of Yom Tov, he could be mashlim even on the last day of Sukkot. Well, let's see what Rashi says. Yashlim sudosai zois. So yashlim means to make up. Yashlim doesn't mean you should complete any specific regimen. Yashlim Rashi teaches means it's a substitute. It's a tashlumen, where this original suda you have to make really on the first night of Yom Tov, it could be mashlim that the Yom Tov ba'achri, which would mean b'shmini atzeres. V'afal pishayni b'sukkah, even though it's not in the sukkah of a Gemara parachalom. So the question really here is going to be: is there a mitzvah to have a suda on Yom Tov? Is it about having a suda, or is it about having a suda in the sukkah? So let's see how that comes out in the Gemara. If you miss doing a mitzvah, like having a suda on the first night of Sukkot, you can't fix that. You missed it already. A mistake that cannot be fixed, the concern, and missing something cannot be made up. My time with Rabbi Eliezer, what is this for of Rabbi Eliezer? I'm sorry, what's the story of Rabbi Eliezer who holds you have to have 14 sudas? So the Gemara, Teishvu came to do, because it says Teishvu came to do. You have to live in the sukkah the same way you live at home. Madira, just like in your normal home, achas b'yoyim v'achas b'layla, you'll have a suda in the day, you'll have a suda by night. Av sukkah achas b'yoyim v'achas b'layla, and so too sukkah, you have every day 2 sudas, one by day and one by night. I just want to stop and go back to something that I forgot to note in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, I asked the Kasha, what do you mean 14 sudas that Rabbi Eliezer says? On Shabbos, you have to have 3 sudas, so it should be a total of 15 sudas. There was another Kasha as well, another deek that they made to the Mishnah. It says, Achas b'yoyim v'achas b'layla. If the first suda starts the night before, so why doesn't it say Achas b'layla v'achas b'yoyim? Like we always do. When we're talking about a day in Yiddishkeit, the night always precedes the day. So on that, the answer is that this 14 in Rabbi Eliezer's count does not include the chiyuv of Suda for the first night. He's counting as 14 from the Suda that's done the first day of Yom Tov. That also explains why it says first Achas B'Yom and then Achas B'Layla. So, frankly, the Rabbanim will hold that you don't have to have 14 Sudas. You don't have to do it every day in the Sukkah. It says Teishu came to do it. In your own home on a regular day, you're not mechuyev to eat. If you want to go on a fast, you can do that. Afsukanami, so too on sukkahs, you could live in your sukkah the same way that you would live in your home, and that is you have a choice if you want to eat or not. Morning. If that's the case, the first day of Yom Tov as well. We have a special limud to teach us, in fact, that there's a special mitzvah to have a Suda on the first night of Yom Tov. Shenemar kan chamisha asar, v'nemar chamisha asar b'chagamatzais. It says in our sugya, it says regarding the Yom Tov of Sukkot, it says Daber al b'nei Yisrael lemar b'chamisha asar yoim l'chodesh hashvi hazeh chag hasugais shivashalom Hashem. You see the lesson of b'chamisha asar yoim, and then regarding Pesach, the pasuk says b'chamisha asar yoim l'chodesh hazeh chag hamatzos l'Hashem shivashalom matzos l'Hashem. So the question is, we seem to have a Gzera Shava chamisha asar chamisha asar malalon, just like the first night of Pesach, just like by Pesach Laila Rishon Chayva. There's a chiyuv to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. Mekan veilach rishos, but the rest of Pesach, if you don't want to have any bread products, you don't have to eat matzah. Afkan, so too, when we're talking about Sukkot, Laila Rishon Chayva, the first night is a chiyuv to have that suda. Mekan veilach, but the rest of Yom Tov rishos, if you don't want to eat things that are mechayiv, you eat in the sukkah, you don't have to. In fact, how do you know over there? There's only a chiyuv to eat matzah the first day and no other day. Amakra, the pasuk says, "Be'erev teichlu matzahs." Because of kavay chayv, the Torah says, "Be'erev teichlu matzahs," to tell us that there's a chiyuv to eat matzahs on the first night of Pesach. So let's see how Rashi explains these lemudim. Mikan veilach rishos. The rest of Pesach, you don't have to eat matzah if you don't want it. This is what we learned in the last parak of Psachim. It says, Sheishes Yomim, Toichel Matzos, Uviyem HaShvi Atzeres. It says 6 days you eat matzahs, and on the 7th day it's just a Yom Tov. Which means it seems like there's no chiyuv to eat matzahs on day 7. Or otherwise it says Shivas Yom Toichel Matzos. So we learn Ma Shvi Rishos, just like day 7 of Pesach, there's no chiyuv to eat matzahs, only Rishos. Af Shisha Rishos, so too, all the 6 days are rishus except for the first night. Where do you see that? The pasuk only says Uviyom HaShvi Atzeres. Zakrashi Lefi Sheshvi V'Chalal Shivas Yom Toichel Matzos. Hoya. If the Torah says Shivas Yom Toichel Matzos, so of course the 7th day is one of those 7. Yet the Yatzim and Aklal. Yet the Torah extracted the 7th day of Pesach from the klal, from the rule that all 7 days you must eat matzahs. L'lamed, to teach you shachilas matzahs hamur by in a chayva. It teaches you that there's no chiv on the 7th day. It says if you have a shviat tzara, so on day 7 only, there's no chiv to eat matzah. Elam bas alechel, the whole chiv is that if you want to eat a bread product, to eachilascha matzah v'lechamit. Make sure it's matzah, not chametz. But there's no chiv to eat. So we have a rule called Davar Shayim in Aklal, the Yatzim in Aklal L'Lamed, that was pulled out of a klal to teach it a separate halacha. In our case, is that you don't have to eat matzah. We say on that, Rashi, it's not only teaching a halacha about it itself, it teaches us that the entire klal of chiv to eat matzahs is really a rishus. How do you know the first night is a chayva? And that we have a pasuk that says, "But erev teichlu matzah is a pasuk kavod." So there we learn that there's a chiyuv to eat the first night of the sukkah, but not the rest of the nights. Rabbi Eliezer, after Rabbi Eliezer said there's a chiyuv to eat 14 chudas, then he said that if you didn't eat the first nights of Yom Tov, you could be mashlim on the last night. So the Gemara challenges this. How could Rabbi Eliezer hold that you could be mashlim? Rabbi Eliezer, Arba Esr Sudas Chayv Adam Lechal B'Sukkah Achas B'Yom B'Achas B'Layla. And Rashi explains. The Amr Rabbi Eliezer Yudal Sudas Chayv Adam Lechal B'Sukkah B'Chivin D'Yom Achrin Lav B'Sukkah Yosy. Since on the last day we know you don't sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, and not only that, if you sit in the sukkah, the Shem Mitzvah, on Shmini Atzeres, I'm not talking about now that it's a Svekid Yoma, but when the Torah was given, with the 8th day there was no Chiv to sit in the sukkah, you'd buy Maltaisim. So Ebezoi, my Ashlama, the sukkah Ikacha. How could eating in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres be a shlama for the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah when you're not even eating in the sukkah? So Amar Abir, Amar Abami, Chazer boy Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was Chazer. So let this needs explanation. What was he Chazer from? What impact does it have? Amar Abir Shem, Chazer boy Rabbi Eliezer, Eitzal Chachamim, Leimer She'ein Lidvar Kitz. Rabbi Eliezer says you don't have to have 14 sudas. You only need to have one suda. And if you want to fast all of Yom Tov, you have a right to. Except for the first night of Sukkot, there is a chiv suda. Not a chiv in the sukkah. It's a chiv suda. The Rabban hold if you didn't eat the first night of Sukkot, there's nothing you can do to make up for that loss of a mitzvah. It's Rabbi Eliezer holds. You know what? There is a backup plan. You could be mashlim that you didn't eat. Just like there's a tashlumin l'karbanis, yom rishon af b'yom tov. We know that if you skip the korban that you're supposed to bring on the first day of Yom Tov, the chagiyah, the shlom, you can bring it until the last day of Yom. So to eating, the mitzvah to eat on Sukkot, the mitzvah that exists to eat the first night of Sukkot, also you can be mashlim up until Shmini Atzeres. Zok Tehillah Gemara Vayter. Mashlim. Rabbi Eliezer said that if you didn't eat the Suda the first day, you could make up for it. Exactly how would you make up for it? First day of Yom Tov was Sunday, now you're on day 7. You're on day 7, you're on Shabbos. And you want to be mashlim for the first meal that you didn't eat. So exactly how are you going to do this? Ilema berifta, if you're going to have bread to make up for that you didn't have the Suda the first night, well, Suda de Yoma Kachel. That's not a tashlumin. That's you're eating for that day. It's not called tashlumin. Zok Rashi, Ilem berifta klaimer, Taimar sheshudas Yom Tov v'achron, shesoid b'lechem, b'lifton, b'tzarchei Suda, to the shlumin arishon. If you're going to suggest that the Suda that you're eating on Shemini Atzeres is going to be mashlim, there's nothing extra eaten there. So that's the Yoma Kachel Zok Rashi. Uma heker yeshkan. How in the world do we know that this is to be mashlim the first Suda? The normal custom of people is to eat every day. So maybe the Suda that he's eating is to fulfill his need to eat every day. Where do you see that he's doing something extra that's being mashlim for an earlier missed meal? Elamai yashlim, what does it mean yashlim? It doesn't mean with the Suda, because you're right. The Suda is something that you eat every day. The yashlim b'mini tagima. Eat things by the meal that you would normally not eat. And what are those? Rashi is b'mini tagima. After they finish the main meal, they should bring like a dessert. Harperois umadanim lefanav. They should bring delicacies in front of him. To go in peiros, like peiros, the kisnin, sweet things. The kaplutos and the gusholos. And cooked kaplutos, I think they're cooked. I'm not sure what they are. Maybe they're. Does the article say what kaplutes are? No. Okay. Tagima is ferongosh. That's how you say it in that language. Zok Tagima Tanya Nami Hachi in Hishlam the mini tagima yotza. And in fact, we have a verse that says that if you use mini tagima, you're Tanya Nami Hachi. That this would in fact be a good way to supplement the Suda. It would be by eating these things. Even though you're not eating an extra Suda of lechem ubasar, the fact that you added these paparois is adequate to make up for the food. Surely, if you washed and benched, and then you washed and benched again, surely that will work. But you could even do it just by adding a dessert to the menu. I'm just trying to figure out if we should learn Tosfos. We have a couple of extra minutes, so let's try learning Tosfos. Because Tosfos has a little bit of a difference of opinion with Rashi on Rabbi Eliezer, as well as the Min Tagima, and it's really a chazara of what we learned in the Masechet Yuma already. So let's see what Tosfos learned. Rabbi Eliezer Yudal Tzuda is Chayiv Adam Lachol B'Sukkah. So how could you say Rabbi Eliezer holds your mashlim? Rabbi Eliezer holds you need to have 14 trudas in the sukkah. And Oy Bazoi, that you're eating on the 8th day out of the sukkah, how is that mashlim for that? So Tosfos, what is Rabbi Eliezer's kasha? Ahad mashlim beyond the mavach and parach to lek the sukkah, which is exactly like what Rashi said. Chazer by Rabbi Eliezer, Eitzach Chachamim, Rabbi Eliezer was Chazer, and now he is agreeing to the Chachamim. There's no specific amount of sudas that one must eat on sukkahs, and therefore from Ratzah L'Isana is Yisada. The only day that you have to eat is the first night. So this is exactly Rashi. So what is the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? Machlokes is merely if you can have tashlum for the first night too. Rabbi Eliezer the Kesava yesh tashlumin, kemoish yesh tashlumin the carbon. You have the Rishon after Yom Tov. A carbon that you were mandated to bring on the first day of Yom Tov, you can be mashlim it even on the last day of Yom Tov. Kach Pirish B'Kuntris. This was Rashi's pshat in the Gemara's teretz of Chazav Rabbi Eliezer. Zoktois v'lishna yashlim and v'hem heshlim, which is the words quoted in the Gemara. Loy mash maklal loshen tashlum. Rashi's teaching yashlim as making up. You didn't have the suda on the first day, so you're making up for it. So I don't think that's what the Mishnah means. That when the Mishnah says yashlim, let's see the lashon wasn't the lashon Mishnah mishal yachal lo yom tov rishon yashlim v'lo yom tov achron. I don't think it means it's a makeup. I don't think that's what it means. El lashon hashlomas cheshbon shel yudal tzudos. The way I understand it, Zok Tosfos, is that it means yashlim v'lo yom tov achron means even if you didn't eat the first day, you still have to continue doing the rest of the regimen, the rest of the requirements, the rest of the days. Therefore, Zok Tosfos, I can't agree with Rashi's pshat. And another problem that I have with Rashi's pshat is the kivan de mimatzah yafinon. Since we're learning the chiyuv to eat the first night is for matzah, lo yafinon, lo matzinon. We can't say like Rashi says, she ate a shlumen lematzah shalayla rishon shal Pesach. You can't say that if you eat on the last day of Pesach matzah, it's as if you ate on the first night of Pesach matzah. It's not mistaber to say that. Additionally, the Mashmak Tzas Yerushalmi, the boy Kzayis Dogron, the Sudas Yom Tov Harishon Shalchad, Kamei Gavi Matzah. It's mashering the Yerushalmi that there's a chiyuv to eat a Kzayis of bread on the first night of Sukkot, just like there's a chiyuv to eat a Kzayis of matzah. And here we're saying if you make up for the first night, Amina the Yashlam Amina Tagima, you're not eating a suda of bread, you're eating fruits. It's also mashma for the Gemara that we're learning in a minute that one suda won't cut it. You need to have 14 sudas. You need to have sudas every day. The kach near the fire, therefore the closest because of all these kashas on Rashi's shot. I'm going to have a different shot in the Gemara's teretz of Chazav bar Rabbi Eliezer. The way I'm going to understand Chazav bar Rabbi Eliezer is Chazav bar Rabbi Eliezer. Sukkah. Eliezer was chayzer for the fact that you have to have 14 sudas inside the sukkah. He's saying there's no chiyuv to have 14 sudas inside the sukkah. Al tilchos sukkah, but al tilchos yom tov you have a chiyuv to have 14 sudas. Yudal sudas boy, and therefore the yashlim is even if you didn't do it the first day, you still have to continue eating sudas because there's a chiyuv to eat sudas every single day, and it's not shver anymore. Why you can use min tagima? Because we're not trying to be yoy to the mitzvah of achila on the sukkah. We're just trying to be yoy to the mitzvah of having a suda on sukkahs.
If Actually, the mitzvah is not even a mitzvah. When it comes to traveling, you can't for a mitzvah, and you can't have a sukkah. Rabbi Eliezer require you to have a sukkah anyway,
Yes.
even outside.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how Tosh is learning. That we're talking about the mitzvah of a Suda independent of the eating Suda.
According to Rabbi Eliezer, it's a mitzvah to have a suda. Why wouldn't you say it's not a mitzvah as well?
In a case where your involvement in the mitzvah would be hampered, would be impacted by the Suda, maybe you wouldn't have to have the Suda. But most people eat every day, even though they don't eat the sukkah every day. But in Echami, it would be.
When you're traveling, you can't do the sukkah, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're supposed to have a meal, a proper meal.
So it's more than that.
Don't get by on pay, right?
Exactly, it's more than that. Don't think. You can't have a sukkah, so you should avoid eating. No, you have to eat.
You have to eat.
Very good, very good. Good point. Yishalmi Mishani, and Yishalmi the Gemara answers, Amar Bacha, the mitzvah cheshuva. What does that mean? You're supposed to eat sukkah, but then you could at least be yoy to the mitzvah of eating a suda, if not eating a sukkah. How does Rashi talk to me? Is it mezayis or is it moitzi? The Rashi seems to indicate that it's Paris, so it's mezayis. I'm sorry, it's not mezayis. It's ha'etz or shahaka. Pirish b'kontris, going Paris v'kistin v'kaplutos mevushalom. Are kaplutos small birds? Could be even small birds. The Efshir Loimakim. I disagree with Rashi like I did in numerous of places. The Rabbi Masak the Periches to Yuma, the Peri Loiboy Sukkah. Rabbi said you don't have to eat in the Sukkah. So it's not mistaber that you're going to be eating these Sudas on Sukkahs. Medayik Mehacha. And he was actually Medayik from our Gemara. Because he said, Paris, Boy Sukkah, if you hold that Paris have to be eaten in the Sukkah, Lushlim with Paris. Let him be Mashlim with Paris. It doesn't say Paris, it's meaning Teguma. Why didn't it say you should eat Paris? The Dachi and the Gemara there is Doicha the Raya. Why didn't you say Paris? And it said the Ashrid L'Shchichi Paris. The Gemara there answered that really you could be Mekayim, the mitzvah of Achila Sukkah with Paris. But maybe this area where the Brasha says you should be Mekayim at the Midas Tegima was a place where Paris weren't so easy to get a hold of. So the Bryce and the Blazer were suggesting simple solution. Or maybe the Gemara says there, mini tagima are also pairs. But Nikol Makei Mashma, whatever the case is, from the Gemara Yuma it seems to really be clear. The Iperi Loi Boy Sukkah, if Paris do not have to be eaten in the Sukkah, Eina Shlomo Me'elis the Paris. Then being mashlim, eating sudas on sukkahs wouldn't work with Paris. So therefore, Zaktoisis, Uminita Gima is mezainis. Have going basav dogim b'shayit varim shemalaptin b'emes hapas. There are things that you eat together with bread, and therefore it's considered something that you'd be mashlim asuda with. It's also something that you would have to eat in the sukkah. Vein lilman dekan. So Toisis in Yuma and as well as over here, Toisis says, now that we're saying that mezainis and minitagima are considered a suda, and you're even mashlim one of the sudas of Yom Tov, eating minitagima, don't take it to the next level, to the level of Lubavitch. No, don't become a Lubavitcher because of this, and don't wash for Shalosh Sudas. Don't think that these payers will work for Shalosh Sudas. The shiny Hasam, there it's different by Shabbos. The Alpino Midechsiv Plasa Hayoim. It says 3 times Hayoim. Gabe Mon in the Sugya of Mon. Shubamakim Pass, which is actually in the Mon is the place of Pass. So you see there's a specific Hakpada by Shabbos Dafka to have 3 suits of Pass. Afilabonu Lashvoisam, the Nafik Beparis can appreciate like Mahanik Abisukah. And even if you want to say that they're equal, I'm not sure what that means, but you definitely wouldn't argue that you could be the kind of mitzvah of Shalosh Shudos with pairs. So Tosis, as an aside, speaks out that although pairs might be good to be the kind of mitzvah of Sukkah, they definitely won't help to be the kind of mitzvah of Shalosh Shudos. Okay, now we have an interesting story. Shaul Apotropos shel Agrippas HaMelech. The Apotropos of Agrippas HaMelech. Rashi says, who is this Apotropos? Munal Shaloi. He was in charge of all of the affairs of the king. Rav Beisai, Shekarin Shlakin Shams. I'm not sure what that says. Shlakat. The Shaklak would be short for Shlakin Shams. Okay, so what does it say over here? So he asked Agrippas HaMelech, I'm sorry, the Apotropos asked Rabbi Eliezer, Kigainani, someone like me, what's special about me? I normally only eat one meal a day. So my norm is only one meal. Am I allowed to eat just one suda? After, and I'll be potter. I shouldn't have to eat two sudas. Amar Loi. So Rabbi Eliezer says, you know what? You should be ashamed of yourself, Mr. Apotropos. You know why? Every day you eat all these different delicacies to enhance your appetite so that you should enjoy your eating in your one suda. So eat food that'll build up an appetite, cover the Rebbeinu Shalom, and have a second suda. When you want your appetite, you'll make yourself an appetite. So you know what? Make yourself an appetite and have a second suda every day. So this is what Tosfos meant earlier. Clearly here it seems to be that we're talking about a shaila of every day do I have to have two sudas. And on that Rabbi Eliezer responded that every day you have to have two sudas, which is what Tosfos argued, that there's a chiyuv to have sudas every day. And therefore Rabbi Eliezer was not chayzer that you don't have to have sudas only the first day. Rather Rabbi Eliezer was chayzer that you don't have to have sudas masukah, but you have to have sudas. So what was this question back to Rashi? And that should be enough. I shouldn't have to have two sudas. So Rabbi Eliezer answered him, that open up your appetite, at least libi moshach achar apas. You eat things that get you hungry for bread, and then you eat. So why not do that as well? Why not do that as well for the appetite so you can be kind the mitzvah of having two sudas on you? This Apotropos, after getting shot down once by Rabbi Eliezer, he asked another question. You think he would whimper away, but no, he's coming right back at it. And he said, someone like me again. I have two wives. Achas b'tferya, v'achas b'tzipuri. I have two different wives. And because of that, I have two sukkos, because you want to go back and forth. Achas b'tferya, v'achas b'tzipuri. Ma'u she'etzei misukka l'sukka v'epah. Do I have to remain stationed in one sukkah all Yom Tov? And we're going to see on Amid Beis there's such a shita. Or am I allowed to move from sukkah to sukkah? Zok Rashi, Ma'u she'etzei misukka l'sukka l'achol v'lishna yoyim bezu or machar bezu. One day I want to be here, one day I want to be there. I'm sorry? Who knows? Maybe his wives. I want to go to Victoria Lake for Halloween. I want to go here, I want to go there. So, Amr Loi. So, Rabbi Eliezer answered him back, Loi, you're not allowed to, you got to stay put. Shani Aimer, because I hope, someone who moves from sukkah to sukkah, Bitel mitzvah shel rishona, he was mevatel the mitzvah of the first sukkah. When you go out to another sukkah, it undoes the mitzvah of the first sukkah. We'll see that works. Even for 3 days you were in a sukkah, and then you moved over to a different sukkah, you lost the mitzvah of the first 3 days in your sukkah. Like the Gemara is going to teach us on Amid Beis, there's a mitzvah to spend all 7 days in one sukkah. Now we're going to see the makar of this halacha. I don't think we talked like that. This is what he said. One is not allowed to go out from one sukkah to another sukkah. And Rashi tells us what this means is lechol bezu, v'lishon bezu. To eat in one sukkah and to sleep in a different sukkah. Or spend a full day eating and sleeping in one sukkah and then moving on to a different sukkah for the next day. Another rule, Rabbi Eliezer said, is the ein oisin sukkah b'chalal shel moed. You're not allowed to build a sukkah in chalal moed. Why would you build a sukkah if you have a sukkah already? You're not allowed to move to another sukkah. But Rashi, this is relevant for Mishalei Yoshev a sukkah Yom Tov Rishon. He didn't have a sukkah at all Yom Tov Rishon. So Chalamoid wants to build a sukkah. No, you're not allowed to. Not a problem, which is how we paskin. Yoitim is sukkah. You can go from one sukkah to the next. And the oisin sukkah b'chayla shalmoid. And in fact, you are allowed to build a sukkah on Chalamoid. The Shavin, both the Eliezer and the Chum agree. Shem Nafla, if you built the sukkah before Yom Tov and the sukkah collapsed, shechayzer ubayna b'chayla shalmoid, that you surely can build it over again on Chalamoid to be able to have a sukkah for the end of Yom. My time of Rabbi Eliezer, where did Rabbi Eliezer get this huge chiddush from that you have to stay in your same sukkah a whole Yom Tov? Omakra, it says in the pasuk Chag HaSukkos Tasalecha Shivas Yomim, and he darshans the pasuk Asay Sukkah Haruya L'Shiva, make a sukkah that's royal for 7 days. Zokt Rashi Asay Sukkah L'Shem Chag Shal Shivas Yomim Shemash Minah. You see from this pasuk there ain't no sukkah b'chayla shalmoid. You can't make a sukkah on Chalamoid Shemoid, Deinu L'Shiva. That's not going to be a sukkah for 7 days. Because once you're at Chalamoid already, there's no 7 days left in the Yom. And you learn as an aside from this halacha, then Yoitim is sukkah l'sukkah. The same way you see that a sukkah has to be for 7 days, and therefore you can't build a sukkah on Chalamoid. So by an extension to that, we know that you can't move from sukkah to sukkah. In Cain, lav sukkah l'shivihi. It's not a sukkah l'shiv. It now explains why we learned on Amar Aleph that if you move to a different sukkah, it's mavatal the mitzvah of the first sukkah, because it made it that your first sukkah was not a sukkah l'shiva, and therefore sitting in it wasn't the mitzvah, so you're totally mavatal the mitzvah. So Rabbi Eliezer is a good support, a good raya for his halacha. A sukkah has to be for 7 days, therefore you can't change sukkahs in the middle, and you can't build a sukkah in the middle. Rabbanon, how is the Rabbanon going to understand? How are the Rabbanon going to interpret this pasuk of Chag HaSukkos Tasalecha Shivas Yomim? This is what the pasuk means to tell us. It means, I say sukkah b'chag. You should make a sukkah on Yom Tov. You should make a sukkah even in Yom Tov, which means any one of the 7 days, make yourself a sukkah. So therefore, behold, that a sukkah could even be for 1 day, because you're even allowed to lechatchila build a sukkah on any one of the days of Yom Tov. I assume the days of Chalamoid. The Shavin, they both agree. Shem Nafla, if your sukkah fell down, you're allowed to rebuild it on Chalamoid. Correct? The Gemara Pshita, and Rashi explains Pshita, the sukkah shivi. If it fell down and you're building it up, it's a sukkah shiva because it's the same sukkah as before. The Gemara maybe Dr. Rashi, since you already sat in the sukkah on Yom Tov, and it fell down, and you're only building this or rebuilding the sukkah to complete the Yom Tov, we'll consider. Kamash Lon, that forget. You might think that once it fell down and you're building it again, it's a new sukkah. Kamash Lon, since you already sat in the sukkah and you're only rebuilding it now, just to be able to continue using the same sukkah for the rest of Yom Tov, sukkah shiva kri. It's called sukkah shiva. This is all the shlum and
Yes, see. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're not allowed to be a guest in someone else's sukkah.
That's correct. According to Rabbi Eliezer, and we're about to touch on that halacha. Whether you can be a guest, we're about to get there. That's the next thing the Gemara is going to discuss. Tosfos adds another condition. What if some of your boards broke when the sukkah fell down? Are you allowed to go to Home Depot and buy fresh boards to resurrect your sukkah? So look what Tosfos says. The top Tosfos is a 2-liner. Kamash Malon, that given the b'yideka of it, since you're making the same sukkah out of exactly the same building materials as the first sukkah, it's the same sukkah. Mashmas of Tosfos will be shabayna isa ba'isa neitz. It's mashma that it only works if you're rebuilding it with the same building materials and you're not putting in new panels. So now let's talk about being a guest. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer, B'Shem shein adam yoyse yidei chavasai, b'yom tov rishon shel chag, v'lulava shel chaver. The same way you wouldn't be yoyse if you used somebody else's lulav on the first day of Yom Tov. D'chsevu lakachtem lachem b'yom harishon and pri etzad kapis tomorrow. And we learn mishalachem, it has to be yours. Rashi, it's weiter. Kach, so too, ein adam yoyse yidei chavasai, v'sukasa shel chaver. Exactly like Nabi said. You would not be yaitza using somebody else's sukkah. Chsiv chag sukkah is tasalach shivesh yamim. Tasalach tells you mishalach. It's got to be yours. So the Rebbe Lezer holds, in fact, you're not allowed to sit in a bar or sukkah. You have to build yourself a sukkah. But the Chachamim
You can't gift your friend your sukkah like you do with the lulav.
no, maybe you could. If someone gives it to you and it's yours, it would be no different. But if you want to just use your friend's sukkah, then it wouldn't be allowed.
But you can't use it at the same time because you can't give it to him as a gift and then use it. Meaning like a lulav, you're not both.
Well, if you give it to him, then it's not lachem anymore.
Right. I'm saying like lulav, you give it as a gift so you can use it, and then he's using it and he gives it back, right? But the sukkah, you can't both be in there at the same time.
Maybe you could do that. Maybe you could technically give it back and forth, but then you're right, you wouldn't be able to be there at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Unless the sukkah is big enough to have 2 shiurim of sukkah. And you can say, I get this wall, I get the north wall and half of the east and half of the west wall, and you get the south wall and half of the east and half of the west. That's what the Gemara is saying. The Chum say, Ava Bisha Amru, and Adam Yoitzi Yidei Chevasai, the Yom HaRishon, even though we said that you can't be Yoitzi on the first day, the Lulav Shal Chaverei, Avo Yoitzi Yidei Chevasai B'Sukkah Shal Chaverei. You are Yoitzi using your friend's sukkah, and I have a proof that you can use a shared sukkah. The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael, every guest of Israel, Yeshu B'Sukkahs, will sit in sukkahs, should sit in sukkahs. Malamed, it teaches you to call Yisrael Ruyim Leisha B'Sukkahs. You see, all of Klal Yisrael can eat together in the sukkah. So it must be that someone's eating in a borrowed sukkah. How is that? Maybe everybody has a little bit of ownership in the sukkah. So for that, Rashi teaches us. The mashma sukkah achas l'chol Yisrael sheyeshu bo zeh achar zeh. It's mashma you could have one sukkah that you can take shifts in, and you can book a time, and everybody will use the sukkah one after the other. Rashi, based on that, the kulon chelik ba. It's impossible that everybody should have a significant financial ownership in the sukkah, so that you can argue that in fact this is also lachem. Rashi, you know why? If you have 100,000 eaten and you have one sukkah that's 7 by 7, there's simply not enough equity in this sukkah to be able to say that each person has of Klal Yisrael has a shavaputa ownership. Ella al yidei she'ela. It must be that you're borrowing. Someone owns it, not necessarily you, and everyone's using the same sukkah that belongs to a third party. And that's how you know, Dr. Chacham, in fact, you can use a borrowed sukkah. Which is how we pass. What about sukkahs and travel?
Real estate here is so expensive. It's possible.
We're not just chipping in for the board, we're chipping in for the floor as well. Yeah,
Land value.
I hear. Very good. Very good. Okay. Malamed, Shekol Yisrael Ruyim, Leishav V'Sukkah. V'Rabbanon, Hai L'cha my Darshimei. Rabbi Lezer did say that the pasuk says Chag HaSukkos Tasa L'cha. The word L'cha means Mishulachem Yehei. How does he deal with that? So tomorrow, Miboy Le'lemute Gzula. That's just to tell you that you can't have a stolen sukkah. But a borrowed sukkah, I have a pasuk that tells me clearly you can rely on it because ksiv kala ezrach, like we just discussed. Let's see Rashi. Lachem mishalachem. Just the gadol was a shol was according to Rabbi Eliezer, and according to the Chachamim, it's only being mitzi. It's only being mitzi gezula. Rabbi Eliezer, hi kol ezrach my albedlay. What does Rabbi Eliezer do with kol ezrach? Everybody could share the same sukkah. The moment we boiled legation is gayer bein time. A ger that became a ger on sukkahs, the kadol shenis gadol in time, and the child whose bar mitzvah was on sukkahs. This is very good fodder for a bar mitzvah. So let's see what it says in Rashi. In time b'chayil shlomoid, the kadol shenis gadol samchuloi beisayis b'moed. He became a gadol on choloid. V'as a high kol l'rebuye. The kol ha'ezrach Yisrael is coming to teach us. Although everybody else, Dr. Eliezer, has to have one sukkah for all of Yom Tov, these people who only became a chuyiv in the midst of sukkah on Yom Tov, they're allowed to build a sukkah on Yom Tov, and their sukkah will be good even though it wasn't for 7 days. But if you're mechuyiv in all 7 days of sukkahs, then you have to build a sukkah before sukkahs for all 7 days. You cannot build a sukkah in the middle of Yom Tov Like Rabbi Eliezer said a little bit earlier. Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? How did they know? How did they know that the Gerish and his guy are cutting to build a sukkah in the middle of Yom Tov? Rabbanan, I don't need a pasuk for that. I know that you can build a sukkah any day. Even Jamar, I don't have a problem. I never said you need to have a sukkah for 7 days. You can build a sukkah for 1 day at a time. Rabbanan Zakrashi, even the army sukkah b'chol shamoy, even somebody who really should have built the sukkah before sukkahs, he's allowed to build the sukkah on sukkahs. Therefore, I don't need a special ribui that a cotton that became a gadol on Yom Tov or a gersh in his guy. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that he can build a sukkah. He's no worse than anybody else. Zog to more about Tanarabban. There was a story with Rabbi Loi, Shahalach lahakbil Penei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Balud Berek. He went before Shabbos. Rashi says Yom Tov Rishon. The Halach Estem Erev Yom Tov. So Rabbi Loi left his family to spend the first part of Yom Tov, or maybe all of Yom Tov, with Rabbi Eliezer's Rebbe in Lud. Amr Loi. Rabbi Eliezer said, "I'm not impressed." Eloi, Einach Mishayvsei Haregel. You're not from those who rest on the regel. Rashi says, since you didn't stay at home with your wife where you should have, you're not from the people who rest on Yom Tov. So Rabbi Eliezer used to say, these lazy people, normally I don't respect lazy people, but the lazy people who stay home for Yom Tov, I respect those people. Why is that? You're supposed to be Mesamech your wife. So I'm happy if you stay home. So I'm not happy with you that you came to spend Yom Tov with me. Clearly it's not a Chassidish Rebbe. Even though the lazy people, the reason why they're not going is not because they want to stay home for Yom Tov. They're just too lazy to go anywhere. They never go anywhere. Even a broken clock is good twice a day. So today, that's London who don't go out. Today, I respect. Frankly, why would Rabbi Eliezer say? Why would he discourage Rabbi Loi from coming to him for Yom Tov? How do you know that you're supposed to go visit your Rebbe in Regel on Yom Tov? Shenemar Madu Atayleches, and this Rashi tells us happened to Baila Shel Shunamis Omerla. The husband of the Shunamis, which I believe is the mother of Shimshon, right? She said, no, this is not. No, I'm sorry. This is not the mother of Shimshon. This is the Shunamis who Elio helped. So she wanted to run to the Navi, and what did her husband ask her? What's up? Is she going today? Why would you be going to the Navi today? She's not Rishoidish for Shabbos. From the fact that her husband suggested, it was Alicia. I'm sorry. So he was the one who gave her bracha that she have a child, or he's the one who filled up her she gave her bracha with children. Okay, Mechalal, the Bechaydish for Shabbos, Mechayvinish lak pull up here. You see that it was the norm that if it was a special occasion, a special event like a Shabbos or a Chaydish, you go look at your Rebbe. So you see clearly there's an Indian on Yom Tov and Shabbos to go visit your Rebbe. When is our mitzvah to go visit your Rebbe on Shabbos? That's also be yomi. If you can go and come back the same day. If Shmuel Kamenetsky's in town, I'm allowed to walk down to Dov Kamenetsky's house to say he jumped with him and walk back. But to go away for Yom Tov and abandon your family, that's inappropriate. Also be yomi. So Rashi, the also be yomi. And even though he's going to visit his Rebbe, he could still be with his wife and his family. Then chayv lakol pnei Rebbe. If the city that the Rebbe is in is accessible within the Tchum or the Erev, but to go away for Yom Tov, I'm not impressed. So here, Rabbi Loi made the trip to spend the Yom Tov with Rabbi Eliezer, and he wasn't feeling too good about it because his Rebbe told him, I don't need you here. Tanarabban, Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer, Sheshavas beGlila Elyon, B'Sukkosoi, Shel Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Loi, B'Kisri. Rabbi Eliezer spent the Yom Tov of Sukkot, it seems, at least from the Havini of the Gemara now. He spent it in the sukkah of Yochanan bar Eloi in Kisri. Ramila b'Kisriyah, or maybe it was in Kisriyah. Zokt Rashi, Shushavas b'Sugos Shayachim l'Kamei Parach, Amar Rabbi Eliezer v'Shabach Nisatlan. This is the same Rabbi Eliezer who said you shouldn't be traveling, and here he was happy to travel. So what happened was, the sun was going to start shining on the sukkah, it would make him uncomfortable. Amr Loi, so Rabbi Yochanan asked his Rebbe who was visiting, Rabbi Yochanan asked his Talmud, I guess. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Eliezer, am I allowed to put a shmata over the sukkah to add some shade? The Rashi let's sail, Shaloi, his zapeh Hashemish, the sun shouldn't, I guess, burn out and dry up my schach. So his shaila was not also if it's a kosher sukkah, if you're allowed to do that. Shaila is merely, is there a problem of being moisef on the oil ari on Shabbos? The sukkah is an oil ari, and by putting a shmat over it, you're adding to the oil. Amar Loi, instead of Rabbi Eliezer answering him, he changed the subject. He threw out a diversion. And he said, there's not a single shevet that didn't have a shofet. So he just talked about something else. Rashi says he sealed over acher. And we're going to soon see why. So then the sun started beating down on the sukkah. So once again he asked his Rebbe, and again he changed the subject. Shevet Yehuda Binyamin, Hamidu Malachim, Alpi Neviim, and Yehuda and Binyamin didn't have Neviim directly, but they had Malachim that were appointed through the Neviim. Now the sun reached already that it was beating down on Rabbi Eliezer's leg. Then Rabbi Yochanan didn't ask any more questions. He wanted to protect him. And you know what happened when he did that? Rabbi Eliezer, he took off his talis, and he left. So you see, Rashi says, he didn't want to, by him living in that sukkah there, it would show that he's maskim, and he didn't want to be quoted by anybody as having expressed an opinion about this at all. Why? Rashi says, that Rabbi Eliezer changed the subject. He wasn't trying to avoid teaching his Talmud Torah. He was happy to teach Talmud Torah. The problem is, he never passed in the halacha unless he heard his Rebbe address it specifically. So even though in his das he held it shouldn't be a problem, he didn't want to pass on anything that he didn't hear from his Rebbe. It was his mila that he did. How could he do that? How could he leave the sukkah? How did he even go visit Rabbi Yochanan bar Eloi? You're not allowed to go. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Like we just quoted from him. Zok to Gemara, Regal Acharavoy. He wasn't Sukkot. It was a different Yom Tov. He went for Shavuos. Rashi says, go to Teres. But Yoshvin, the Sukkah B'Shemaver, they were only sitting out in the Sukkah because it was nice air. But he didn't go out of the Sukkah. He didn't leave the Sukkah. Even if it was Shavuos, Viter, he says you shouldn't go away. You shouldn't leave your home for Shavuos. The Gemara Shabbos Avoy, it was Shabbos. It was a regular Shabbos. And this whole Shaila happened on a regular Shabbos. Okay, I guess we should stop here because this is already getting a little bit into actually it's one line left. I think we were holding 6:55. Now we better stop. We'll pick up here tomorrow, Mitchum, and we'll learn the last little stickle. Goes back. It gives us a little bit of a reminder from Shabbos.
Go ahead.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Oh, yeah.